Hey, everything you just saw was shot with this lens, the Sony 28-70 f2 G Master. Sony were kind enough to send this lens out to me for the last couple of weeks, and I've been using the lens, as you've seen, in various situations, scenarios, travel, client work, stuff for myself. And really, my reason was to kind of see if this zoom lens is the one for me. I shoot prime lens mostly, 24 and 50 for the longest time, as you all know. I do own a zoom, and it's a 70-200, but outside that, all my lenses are prime lenses because I prefer using them for a number of reasons. One of them is the look you get shooting prime lenses, or can get, especially when you shoot them wide open, and this zoom lens kind of has it, which is awesome, and has caused me to have a lot of thoughts about how much equipment I carry around with me, what I should be using, when I should be using it, do I want this lens, if I get this lens, will it replace some of my lenses, if so, which ones? Like, there's a lot of questions and I don't have the answers to all of them yet after using this lens. I think I probably will after I send it back and go back to using my primes for a period of time. I may appreciate some of the conveniences of this zoom even more than I do now. So first, I jump into some specifics about the lens, then we'll move into a comparison against other lenses that you could consider in this mid-range zoom category. Again, the lens is a 28-70mm f2 constant aperture zoom. It has an 86mm front filter thread, which is quite large, but you can buy 86mm filters. I've looked into this. And there are videos that show people using a step down to 82mm without any noticeable vignette. Though I have not tested this myself, I would suggest doing your own research. But there are claims out there that that can be done. I didn't use any filters on this lens in my time shooting it. And that's partly because I wanted to see the optical performance just true to the lens without putting polarizers and all these things in front of it that can create different color casts and various things to the photos. So that's my reason, but you can get them. What's on the lens? We have a auto to manual focus switch. We have Sony's customizable buttons, one positioned on the top and the side, which Sony do with, I believe, all their G Master lenses. Correct me if I'm wrong. There's an iris lock switch. There is an aperture ring, and it's declickable for video people out there, so you can not have the aperture ring doing when you adjust it. You know, if you do video, it'll make sense. And there is one more button. That is the smooth or tight setting for zoom. So if you have this on tight, it takes more effort to adjust the zoom than if you have it on smooth, where it's quite literally smooth. Why would you want this? Well, it just gives you a bit more control. I don't find that the zoom's just kind of dropping anyway. I know it's a fairly new lens, but still that's not happening. The zoom lens does extend externally, but not by much. Let's take a look. I mean, I don't think that's much at all, but just to take note, it does do that. But it doesn't rotate externally, so you don't have to worry about your polarizer doing this when you're doing this. Comparison. The obvious comparison is the 24-70 f2.8. What do you lose if you choose the 28-70? You lose 4mm at the wide end, which did feel noticeable to me, someone who shoots a 24mm prime. It does feel noticeably tighter, but I mean, it says it on the label and you should expect it to be. If that was at the long end, you probably wouldn't even notice it. It's just how it works, I guess. You also lose some minimum focus distance. I'll pop the details up so you've got the specifics for comparison. But when I was away in France, Daryl bought his 24-70 and we did a little comparison whilst we were shooting something, and we could notice the difference in the minimum focus distance of both lenses. It's bigger and heavier than the 24-70 f2.8, as to be expected, but not that much bigger. I mean, if you compare it to the version 1, it doesn't seem that much bigger at all. So another thing that you gain with the lens is the fast aperture and a shallower depth of field. This is especially noticeable between 50 and 70mm, mostly at 70mm. And here's an example to show you guys the difference between shooting at f2.8 and f2, first at 50mm. So here's our f2.8 image at 50mm, first shooting at 1/200th of a second and 200 ISO, and yes, the background is blurry. Of course it is, the subject is quite close, probably 2.5 meters if I remember. Now let's jump to the f2 example, and at f2 we've got noticeably softer background with a shallower depth of field. You can even see that it's kind of going out of the plane of focus on the car. I've also got an example shot at f1.2 on my 50mm lens, just to put that up against the others, which again shows even more shallower depth of field and a more blurred background, again, as can be expected. Also at f2 versus f2.8, we are able to double our shutter speed and keep the same ISO. Another comparison I think that's worth pointing out, here's another frame at 50mm at f1.2 compared to this frame at 70mm at f2. I think that there's quite a similar look to the background blur and characteristics of the photo with these two comparisons. Obviously the focal length is different, and so compression is a little different between the images, but the background blur is very similar. Here's a look at 28mm and 70mm just stood at the same spot, zooming in to show the difference at both extremes of the lens. Here's an example of the same Jeep shot at 28mm and 70mm to show you the difference between the distortion and compression. So how does the camera feel in the hands? I shot the lens with an A7R5 and an A7 IV, mostly on the A7R5, and I was really surprised actually. I mean, holding it here, you can see that it's not a small lens, though we've already covered. It is relatively small for what it is, in my opinion, but it's not front heavy, which means it's quite nice to hold. Holding with one hand even like this is quite doable for an extended period, and I don't find that there's this sort of feeling with the lens that I might experience with my 70 to 200 if I was using that in the same way. It feels more front heavy. Because it's not front heavy, the weight is kind of, I don't know, it's easier to hold. Obviously it's more comfortable in two hands, but I've shot with this for an extended period of time and I've been more comfortable with the lens than I thought I would be. One thing it has done though is it made me think that my 51.2 is really small, when I always considered this a bit of a chunk by comparison to my other lenses, at least. So an important question, who is the lens for? Now, of course, this is in my opinion. The first type of photographer that I think of with this lens has to be a wedding photographer. I've shot a number of weddings over the years. I'm not shooting for a little while, but I used to shoot them semi-regularly, and this lens would have been a dream for a massive part of the day. Obviously I would have liked some other lenses for certain things at weddings, but I think if I was shooting weddings regularly, it would be my most used lens at them, without a doubt. That 70 f2 look is so nice. Again, back to the comparison between 70 f2 versus 51.2, it's quite close, and yeah, it looks so good. The versatility, it's not too heavy. I mean, typically for a wedding you are carrying quite a bit of gear anyway, so you're already in the realm of I need to carry what makes it work, and it's as light as it can be based on what's available out there for what it is. So weddings, this lens, absolutely what a match. Another type of photography that I think this lens stands out for is event photography. I actually used the lens at an event I shot at Cannes Film Festival. I can't actually share the photos with you, but due to the A-list celebrities and all these people that were there, I packed literally everything I own just to be as prepared as possible. And the only lens that I used for the entire event was the 28 to 70 f2. So that for me made me realize where this lens does excel, and the fact that I could have just packed this for a job like that is kind of crazy. I feel like there's a clear area where it would also just be a significant upgrade on the 24 to 72.8, and that would be any indoor sports, courtside stuff, boxing, MMA, basketball, anything like indoors and courtside where you're close enough that you don't need more than 70mm for a lot of the scenario, and that your option currently would be the 24 to 72.8 and the one stop of light just being something that would make that photography task easier. Another, not necessarily a niche or type of photography, but any scenario where you might be needing to work with, like me, a 24 and 50, or like some people might like to use a 35 and 85, if in that scenario it benefits you to not take two cameras or be changing lenses, then this lens comes in as an option. There's a slight compromise, should we say, on the difference between shooting f1.2 and f2 if you need that, but it's closer to that than the current options available prior to considering this lens. Here's a sunrise photo of Elagug stacks covered in guillemots, and Elagug is actually the Welsh word for guillemot. Next up, Tenby Castle with the tide right in. And finally this shot of Mont Blanc for the brief period that it popped through the clouds for me. Right, so to conclude my thoughts on 28 to 70 f2, it's fantastic. It does a great extent of what my prime lenses do in one package that's just 918 grams, and it's not front heavy like I said, which means it feels nice on the camera and you can use it for extended periods of time relatively comfortably. I don't know if I'm going to be adding this camera to my camera bag yet, however, and that's just because I'm not ready to part with my prime lenses. I didn't expect I would be after using this lens for 3 weeks, but I'm tempted, and that surprised me a little. It's great, it performs really well. 70 f2 looks fantastic. We compared 70 f2 and 51.2, quite similar. And just the knowledge that whilst this lens obviously caters to the scenario where anyone's shooting a 2.8 zoom and pushing it in terms of ISO or having to use slower shutter speeds than they want to, this lens would basically make your job or task easier and get you better photos. But the convenience of this lens is huge, and the fact that you can pack a 28-70 f2 for a trip or a job even and nothing else is quite surprising. So this wraps up pretty much my thoughts on the lens. I'm very keen to know what you think. Have you used one? Are you thinking about using one? What do you use instead? Any questions about it that I haven't answered in this video, let me know in the comments and I'll look forward to reading them, and I will see you in the next video.